Alright, testing the volume. Hopefully you can hear me and and hopefully you don't hear too much noise in the background. Is there someone who can tell me if they can hear me? I have no idea if the volume is working. Well, that's kinda sad. There was more than one person talking earlier. I don't mind showing to only one person, but can the person watching chat? Well then I guess I'll start. Anyways, the video will be saved on my channel automatically, so I'll be able to check out if my test worked afterwards on my own. Alright, so for this session, I decided to go with creating the UI, actually more specifically working with buttons. Because throughout all those streams that I plan to do, I will be using buttons for debugging a lot. So I thought, why not, get rid of the button right away so that it's not a problem anymore. Also, I think it's a pretty easy subject, so for this testing stream, I think it's a good subject to tackle on. Now, before I actually start doing anything, just want to clear out some points regarding the future streams that I will be doing. First of all, you probably noticed, but I'm not a native English speaker, so uh, if sometimes what I say is not exactly uh, easy to understand, don't be afraid to tell me. I want to uh, get better, and I'll take any tips to learn throughout those series. I won't be the only one to learn. I mean, you won't be the only one to learn. I will be also learning. Just different learning resources, right? Second thing, on my channel, I've created a discussion where you can post requests of things you would like me to go through. I will personally read all of them and accept and decline some of them. Basically, if you see it appear on the channel, it's because I accepted it, right? If it doesn't show up, it's because either I did not read it yet or I refused it. If you have an account on YouTube, I'll try to send you a message if I refuse it and why I refused it. The kind of thing I want to show to people is core mechanics and concepts in games. I don't want to show you how to make a game. I don't want to build a clone of anything, and we will never do complete stuff. One of the things that I think is not working with the tutorials online right now is that they usually create one game and step by step show you every aspect of it. And then when you want to do another different type of game, unless you actually understood what they told you, you're gonna have trouble. Now in my case, I won't be showing to you how to make a game. I'll be showing to you how to create pieces of game, right? Mechanics that you can then implement in your games. By showing you only pieces of those mechanics, I hope that you will be able to understand them better than just copying my code and putting it into a game. And so that's why I'm going to show you today how to create what I like to call modular buttons, right? Buttons that aren't hard-coded. You can literally just copy the button in all your project and it's done. You never need to create a button anymore. So my style of coding doesn't follow most conventions. And that's the second point of my streams. Don't follow my streams if you want to follow the right way to code, or if you want to follow the textbook way to code, because I don't care about those. I code stuff in the way that I feel is right, on my own style. And you should code your stuff in your own way, in your own style that you think is right. If what you think is right is doing what the textbook will tell you, that's great. There's no problem at all with it. But just don't come and tell me, oh, you should not do it that way. That's not the right way of doing it. I don't care. I just simply do things my way, and I'm glad with how I do stuff. It usually works, so I guess that's a good argument. Um, Also, I will try to explain as much as I can what I'm doing, but don't be afraid to ask questions. That's the main goal of creating streams, right? I want to be able to see your questions and answer them while I'm doing it, because this way I can show you some examples and etc. Alright, so enough with the stupid blah blah stuff. Let's actually get into it. So as you can see, I have no project, right? I'm all I have is this little folder here with some resources. So I thought I had some sounds, but I have sounds, and I have some sprites here, which comes from a free asset that you can download online. So it's the Kene UE pack. Uh, we're going to be using that because it looks good, and we want to create UI, so why not take a UI sprite sheet, right? I suck at drawing, so in my series I'll mostly be using sprite sheets like those. They're all free of copyright, of course, and feel free to use your own assets because what I'll do is not tied to what I'm using. Like I said, the button that we're going to be creating is generic. Alright, so without further ado, let's start. So just creating a simple project here. I'm using a theme for a game maker, which is called, I think it's Dark Void. No, it's GM Metro. Wow, that was pronounced very wrong. A G Metro. So it has the Metro style of Windows 10, and I think it looks good. So I'm using this. Also for the colors, I bought a theme called Night Jungle, and I'm using the color scheme of that theme because I like it. On request I can send, no problem. The color scheme, because I modified it, so it's not the one that actually comes with the theme. And the Gmetro theme is free, so I can actually send it to. Alright, so the first step will be to actually decide what we want to do. So what I want to do first is, one, have a mouse pointer that is custom. Most games want that. They don't want to use the default mouse because, you know, while making a game, you want everything to be exactly as you want it to be. You don't want to use any default stuff. So we will have the mouse pointer. We will also have a button which has three states. There will be the normal state. There will be the state when the button has the mouse over it, and there will be the state when the mouse is pressing on the button. We want the button to be able to have any size, to display any text. We won't bother with icons for now because that's a little bit more complex and I want to make something very simple today. And we will also have a custom action, right? The button should do something when you click on it, and adding an action to a button should be actually very simple. So the first step would be to import the sprites that we're going to use. So let me quickly do that. The convention that I follow for sprite, or actually whatever resource naming, is 3-letter representing the resource and then an underscore. If you're using S followed by a capital letter, if you're not using any prefixes at all, that's alright, there's no problem with it at all. Like I said, the way I'm doing stuff is the way that I like to do them. You can do it the way you like to do them. The goal is just for me to show you some simple concepts, not the only way of doing things. Alright, so the first one is the cursor. So let me just call that cursor. And then it's in here. The sprite already has no background, so I don't need to click on remove background here. And that's not what I wanted to do at all. Good job, said. File, and then create from strip is what I wanted to do. And then I have to go back on my desktop. There we go. So now you have this little dialog here that opens that lets you create an animation from a sprite sheet. In my case, my animation only has one sprite because it's the cursor and it's here. right? So normally you would have to find the actual dimensions of everything. In my case, I want one image. There will be 1, 2, 3. Well, who cares about the image per row? The size of the image is 16 by 16. There are uh, 2 pixels separation between each pixels, and then I start at 0, and finally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, then 28. So it's 28 over here. So cell offset is the number of cells to skip. I want to skip 28. And no, it's 27 in the end. So if I check, it does line up over here. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. There we go. Perfect. So as you can see, I've selected the correct frame from my sprite sheet. If I click OK, it should import right here. We have a nice little arrow, and I picked the gray one because I'll show you how to apply color to sprites without the need to import tons of sprites. If you have a grayscale color of your image, you can then change the color to whatever you want in your game with just code, which is very nice. Alright, so we have a cursor. Next we want to import a button, right? So SPR button, not load sprite, it's sprite, and then file create from strip. Now for the button, I'll do something special. I will show you a little trick that I use myself to be able to resize a button without it being all deformed. The technique that I'm going to use is called slice 9. You probably already heard of it. You can actually very clearly see it here. For example, if you take this square over here, as you can see, it's separated into 9 pieces: the 4 corners, the 4 borders, and the center. So basically what the slice 9 script will do is it will take those 9 pieces and it will tile them. Well, in my case, I'll stretch it because there is no pattern, but you could also modify the script to, instead of stretching, to tile it. So I will stretch the borders. I will keep the corners intact. So this way the corners will look perfect, the borders will look perfect, and the center will simply be stretched. There will be no problem. And instead of drawing and calculating the button all the time, I will show you how to draw it on the surface and then create a sprite out of the surface. So this way we only need to draw it once, do all the calculation once, and then the button is ready for whatever, how long we need it. So I want to take the 2 big squares here because we need the normal state and we need the pressed state. And I also want to have a hover state, which we will edit manually because there is no hover state in this tile set, or sprite sheet, should I say. Alright, so I want a 3 by 6 here, as you can see. So the number of image is 18. There will be 3 image per row. The image is 16 by 16. It's also 2 by 2. But this time I want to start on the first column, and I want to start on the third, whoa, wrong one. Here I want to start on the third image. So as you can see, I correctly selected all 18 frames here. Now if I press OK, it should load them like so. So you have a weird little animation going on. That's perfect. That's amazing. That's what we want. We will create a script right now actually to be able to draw a sprite any size we want based on all those little pieces here. Alright, so let's go. I'll call the script slice9. Again, the little SCR, you can put whatever you want. Then let's put the help guide here. If you don't know what this is, when you put 3- on the first line of a script, it will display the help for this script. So for example, when you type, I don't know, draw sprite, see this little guide that appears at the bottom that tells you what are the parameters, and while you type the parameters, it highlights the parameter that you are currently providing. Well, if you put 3- inside of a script, you can tell GameMaker what is the little help here. So it's very simple. All you have to do is write the script name exactly the same as here, and then you just put the name of every parameter you want to have. GameMaker will do everything else automatically like magic. So of course the first parameter is the width of the button that we want to create. Well, not the button, but the sprite, right? Because slice9 will just resize the sprite. Then the height. Then slice9 needs 4 values. Those 4 values are the lines. So if I go back to the image just to show you quickly, let's zoom in a little bit. There we go. So do you see? Well, that's weird. It just randomly closed. So let's try this again. So do you see this square here? If you look carefully, you can see there's one line here, one line there, one here, and one here. Those are the 4 values you need to provide in order for slice9 to work properly. Why is that? Well, if you provide this line here, then slice9 will know what is the height of all the pieces that are here, which will be extremely useful in the calculation process, right? But also if you provide this one here, not only will slice9 know the size of this area, but automatically, because it knows this size and this size, it will understand this size here. So we need to provide 4 values, and the 4 values are the lines, the separation lines if you would like, and those values are relative to the closest border to them. So this line here, the value that I have to give is the distance from the border to this separator here. Same thing for this line here. I have to give the distance from the border here. This one is the distance from the border here, and this one is the distance from the border here. Now in this case, it's extremely easy, because we're working with a sprite sheet where every single piece is 16 by 16. So in our case, the 4 values are 16, 16, 16, and 16. Theoretically, it could be a lot smaller. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the left side could be 4, the bottom side could be 6, etc. The goal is that you capture all corners. The borders are not important because they're going to be stretched. but what you want to keep intact are the corners. So as long as you have this piece intact, everything else doesn't matter, because as you can see, it's just a 1 pixel width that is repeated all the way up to here, and then you have your other corner here. So the goal of slice 9 is for you to provide the 4 corners in the way you wish them to be intact. Everything else will be stretched. Alright, so in this case, like I said, it's very easy. It's 16 by 16. So let's actually do this. Let's define the orders. I want the left border first, the top border next, right, then bottom, and finally, of course, we need to provide the sprite that we want to use for the slice 9, because otherwise our script just doesn't know what to do. So we need the sprite index and then the image index to start from. I'll call it start index, because in our, actually no, I'll call it sprite index with no image index, and actually our sprite here, the button, let's just create 2 of them. So I'll duplicate this one in order to not lose everything. So duplicate. This one will be SPR button active, so when the button is being held down. And let's remove the 8 first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Actually it's 9 because it starts at 0. So now I have just the second one. And then in the normal button, let's remove those like this. So now this is the normal state. Alright, so we just need to provide the sprite, and the script will handle everything else. Alright, so the first step, when I create script, my first step is always to check the arguments and to show an error if something is wrong, because I don't like the default GameMaker error reporting system. It's kind of hard to read. I'd rather actually show my own custom error before the GameMaker report. Yes, so here's how I do it. First, I check the arguments. So let's create some variable quickly. Normally I would use full words for scripts, but this one is not very important, right? It's not a script that you will return to read how it works, because the script will always do the same thing. So I will use letters for this, but each time I will put or write a letter, I will actually say what the letter means so that you're able to follow. So let's go on. So first of all, we have the width, the height, the left border, the top border, the bottom border, the right border, and then the sprite. So those are our letters. They are exactly the same as here. And then we can start. First, we must check that the argument count is valid. So if argument count, this will tell us how many arguments were given to our script. So it must be larger or equal. If it's larger, I don't care because I have all the information I need. If it is equal, that's perfect. That's what we want. But if it's smaller, that's where we will generate an error. So if argument count is smaller than, then we have 4 values, 5, 6, and 7 values. So if it's smaller than 7, we want to show an error. So show message script slice 9 takes 7 arguments you provided, and then argument count, and then show error it's going to be exactly the same error, but because the user saw this before, they won't have any problem when they see this. They can click abort or ignore, whatever they want. I have two. There we go. And then in this case, we need to abort because the script cannot execute if we don't have all the arguments. So true to abort. And finally, no, that's actually it. There we go. So now we can go on. So width equal argument 0, height equals argument 1, left border equals argument 2, top argument 3, right argument 4, and sprite argument 5. I'm missing one. Left, top, right, bottom 4, 5, and then 6. There we go. So now we have all our arguments. We can start writing the script. Normally, I would do even more checks. For example, if the sprite exists, or if the values are actually numbers, etc. But for the sake of simplicity, I will avoid doing this for now. The goal is just to show you a concept. Alright, so the next part is to draw the sprite on the surface. Oh, one error that we actually need to do. Make sure the sprite has enough sub-images, because otherwise we will get errors from GameMaker and we will not understand why. So if sprite get number, let me just show you quickly what this is, returns the number of sub-image in a sprite. So you give it the sprite index and it will return a number, which is the number of sub-images. Very useful, for example, in my case. So sprite get number, and then we pass in the sprite, which is our s variable. And if it is smaller than 9, then we need to generate an error because we don't have enough sub-images to create our slice 9. So I'll do exactly the same as here, but I'll change the message to something different. So slice 9, the provided sprite doesn't have 9 sub images. And here we put exactly the same thing, like so. Alright, now we can draw for real. So to draw the surface, we will need a surface, right? So I will create a variable. This time it's going to be surf for surface. And then I also, for the sake of the mathematic operation that we're going to do right after, we'll need the width and the height of the sprite that we loaded, because we need to be able to calculate using the top, left, right, and bottom to get the center. So to get the center, we will do the width of the sprite minus the right side minus the left side, and that's going to give us the center. So we need the sprite width and the sprite height. So surface equals surface create. Surface create takes the width and the height. We have those already. They were given to us by parameter. So this is the target size of the sprite. Then we need to calculate the width and the height of the sprite. Again, exactly like sprite get number, we have sprite get width and sprite get height. So sprite width equals sprite get width and s, and sprite height equals sprite get height s. So now we have everything we need to be able to draw. So now this is going to be a little bit more complex for me to explain because it's a lot more mathematic. I'll probably need to draw something in Paint if I'm unable to explain it properly. First, we need to tell GameMaker that we want to draw on the surface, because normally the draw actions are executed in the draw event. If you use a draw event, if you use a draw script anywhere else than the draw event, nothing happens. But if you tell GameMaker to draw on a surface, then you can draw wherever you want. Now the manual does state that if you draw in the draw event, it's a lot more optimized than if you draw anywhere else. But for the sake of this example, we will be calling those scripts only in the create event, so it doesn't really matter because it's at the start and it will be only once. But if you would draw in the step event, for example, you might consider moving your code in the draw event instead to optimize the speed of drawing. Alright, so to tell GameMaker to draw on our sprite, on our surface, we need to use the surface set target script. So let me show you that quickly. Set the drawing target to a specific surface. So the example here is surface set target. You give in the ID of the surface, then you can draw. Then it sets the target to a different surface, and then it draws something else, and then it resets the target, which makes GameMaker draw functions draw to the room again. So in our case, we want to draw on the surface, which is called surf. Now, what I usually do when I use surface drawing is that I immediately after I set the target, I reset it. Surface reset target. Like this, there's no parameter to reset target. And then I actually indent my code. This way I know that everything between those two lines is not in the room, but actually on the surface. It's simply easier for me to read when I skim through my code quickly. Alright, so the first step we want to do, when you create a surface in GameMaker, the surface is not necessarily empty. It might contain random data because the surfaces lives in the RAM. So we need to clear it, to empty it. Now there's two scripts you can call. You can use draw clear, or you can use draw clear alpha. Draw clear alpha can actually make the surface transparent, which is very cool in many different situations. Now, because our button has round corners, we want to use the draw clear alpha function because we need a transparent background. We don't want to have, for example, a black background because otherwise the corner will have square black corners, which we don't want. So draw clear alpha. It takes two parameters. The first one is the color. I'll set it to black. Doesn't matter because we will set the alpha to 0. So whatever color you put will simply not show. Then I'll set the color. Before drawing, you should always set the color and the alpha to whatever you want. So in my case, I'll put white. Then draw set alpha, alpha to 1. Why do you always need to call those? It's because in another script you might have changed the color or the alpha. So just to make sure that everything is as you expect, make sure you call those before drawing. Alright, so let's go with the tedious part. We'll start with the first row, which is the top. The top left corner is actually extremely easy to draw. We need to draw the first subimage of the sprite in the top left position of our surface. So draw sprite. We need to specify the sprite, which is S, remember? So sprite index is here, it's S. If you want, you can add comments here to help you. Width, height, left border, top border, bottom border, right border, and finally sprite index. There we go. So now we exactly know what each letter means. So we want to draw the sprite that is stored in the S variable. The sub-image that we want is 0 because that's the top left corner of, if we go check to make sure, is it, if I come in here, as you can see, it's the top left corner. Then the position where we want to draw this is at position 0, 0 on the surface. Remember, we are drawing on the surface, not in the room. Alright, the next one is a little bit more complex. We want to draw the top border, which is the part that needs to stretch. So the logic is we will draw it next to the corner, so left border distance, and we need to draw it for all the width minus the right border. So that's where the mathematic comes in. So draw sprite stretched, like so, which is a GameMaker script that you can use. We want to draw the sprite. We want to draw the first sub image, well actually the second, which is the top border. Let's go make sure that it is indeed the top border. Yep, seems like it's the top border to me. So I want to stretch that. So the next parameters is the position. So I want to draw it using the left border distance. Remember, the left distance is, if I open up this here again, open with paint because for some reason photo doesn't work, right? So I'm trying to draw this little guy here, right? So I need to draw it at the distance of the left separator, which is this line here. That's the L variable that we have. So I put L, then the distance from the top is 0 because it's the top border. Then we need to specify the width. The width will be the surface width, which is the width parameter here, minus left minus right. That's our the width that we want to stretch our sprite to. So actually don't need the sprite width and sprite height because that's when I was actually doing some tests before. Let me remove those so this way you won't wonder why they are there. Never mind them, they don't exist, we never made use of them. Alright, so that's that. So now we have stretched our sprite correctly, and then the height of the sprite is the normal height, which is T for top. Because if we check here, this line is the top value, so it is indeed the height of the top part. Nice, so we've drawn that. Let's draw the right corner. This one is easy because we don't need to stretch anything. So it's the sprite. If we follow the logic, we're now up to the third sub-image. The distance where we want to draw it will be the width minus the right separator, and we want to draw it at the top. So now we've drawn the first row. The other rows will be less complex because it's exactly the same thing. We just need to change the Y position, which was 0 until now. So let's go. Let me put some comments here to help out. So prepare surface, then draw top row, then draw middle row. Let's go draw sprite. We want to still draw the same sprite, and this is the left border, so it's going to be stretched, right? The sub image, we're now up to 3. Let me just quickly check to make sure. So image 3 is this one, and it is indeed the left border. Perfect. The position where we want to draw it is on the left, so 0. But then the height is the distance from the top separator. It's the same logic as for the left separator earlier. The width will be the left separator, and the height will be the height of the surface minus the top and minus the bottom separators. Then we draw the center. The center is the most complex one because we need to stretch it in both directions. So draw sprite stretched S4. And now the distance from the left is L. The distance from the top is T. The width will be the width minus left minus right, and the height will be the height minus top minus bottom. The order in which you subtract them is not important because they are not accumulative, they are relative to the borders, so whatever order you put is not important. I can do H minus B minus T and it would do the same result. Finally, let's do the right border, so sprite stretched S5. I want to draw it to the width minus right. The top will be T and the width will be right. The height will be height minus top minus bottom. And finally, we draw the bottom. Draw bottom row. Draw sprite stretched. Sprite 6. It's in the left corner, so it's 0. The height is the height minus bottom. And it's not draw sprite stretched because it's just a corner, so it's draw sprite normal. Then we draw the bottom border, so now we have draw sprite stretched. S left. It's not left at all, it's 7. Then it's left. Then it's height minus bottom. The width is width minus left minus right. And the height is bottom. And finally, draw sprite S. Eight. Sorry, for a second got lost. Alright, so the sprite, it's the 8, which is actually the 9th subimage. We want to draw it at width minus right and at height minus bottom as the position. And finally, we are done. So now that we've drawn all 9 pieces and stretched them accordingly on the surface, and that we've reset the surface, the next step is to simply create a sprite out of this surface, because a surface will be deleted if you just minimize the game, for example. A surface can be removed from memory at any time when GameMaker deems useful. Where the hell did it go? Which means that either you have to check if the surface exists and if not, redraw it, or, as we decided, we will convert it to a sprite. So this way it will never be deleted until you delete it yourself. So convert surface to sprite. So var spr equals sprite create from surface. I think the name of the function is quite self-explaining. And now what we want to do is pass all those parameters that we see at the bottom. So now let's just quickly take a look at what this does. Here we go. So first we need to give in the index of the surface, which will be used to create the sprite. Then we give the x, y, width, and height of the area that we want to create a sprite from. So we don't even need to use the full surface. We can use only an area of the surface, which is very nice. But in our case, we want to use the full surface. So the x and y will be 0, 0. The width and height will be the width and height of the surface, which are actually the letters w and h that we have in parameters. Next, do we want to remove the background? In our case, no. Do we want to smooth? That depends on your own tastes. In my case, the type of graphic that I took comes from a pack called Pixel UI. It's a pixel perfect sprite sheet, so no, I don't want to smooth it. And finally, you can specify the X and Y origin, which is actually the same thing as when you come and modify this little thingy here. So it will be 0, 0 for the sake of our needs. So the surface is called surf. I said we wanted to take the whole sprite, so 0, 0 with height. We don't want to remove the background. I don't want smoothing, but you can do whatever you want. The origin is 0, 0. So with this, we've created a sprite. The last step we have to do before returning the sprite is to delete the surface. Now that we don't need it anymore because we've created a sprite, we have to make sure to remove it from memory. So surface free and surface. So this way the surface doesn't exist anymore, it doesn't take any memory, and we are happy. So now the last step, return sprite. If you're not very accustomed to scripts, return just mean that we will the script, when you do var test equal script slice 9 like this, right? The value that is stored inside of test is what? It will be the returned value. So in this case, when you will call test equal script slice 9, it's going to put the value from SPR inside your variable. So return lets you tell GameMaker what do you want the script to return when you're trying to access a value. So there we go, return here, we return the sprite that we have created. Now that we can resize a button to any size we want, let's quickly go and test it. So object, let's create an object button, and here we go, add event, create control, and here we go, sprite index equals script slice 9, and let's go. So the width I want, let's go with something weird just to make sure it works. So width, height, the left is 16, 16, 16, 16. Finally, the sprite is SPR button. Let's see if this works. Hopefully it does. And there we go. As you can see, the sprite I have is this, right? It's definitely a lot smaller than what you see on the screen here, but it has been stretched pretty seamlessly. It looks very, very good. And that's the power of Slice 9. Now the Slice 9 script is a little bit, how should I say, weird to work with because it's a lot of mathematics inside of it and there's nothing very interesting going on. We're just drawing on a surface, it's pretty generic and it's boring. It's the kind of script that once you've written it, you'll probably never write that script again. You're just going to import that script in all of your projects. That is modularity, a script that does something that doesn't know about your game. Your game uses the script, but the script doesn't know what the game is. It just does something. So now the next step is to, wait, let me just quickly make the cursor. So in object room, I'm going to go in the creation code and I'm going to do cursor sprite equals SPR cursor. So if you didn't know about that, you can do that. It's very simple. You tell GameMaker, I want the cursor to be this sprite. And that's it. Now we should have our cursor in the game. Now, of course, you might realize that we still see my mouse. Now, of course, I knew that, but I did it because I wanted to show it to you guys, of course. You need to actually tell GameMaker to hide the mouse. So in the creation code here, we will do window set cursor, and the cursors are constant, which are displayed here. You can choose whatever cursor you want. As you see, the first cursor is none, nothing. That's what we want. So all the default cursors from Windows are available. So CR none, and there we go. Now the pointer should look like this. So now the game is starting, well, now the test that I'm doing is starting to actually look more customized because there's no more default stuff. The only default stuff there is the background because we don't have anything else. But it's already looking quite good. Next, we want the button to actually be pressable. So I want to be able to click on it, and I want the sprite to reflect this, which is why we have a second one called active. So this will be a little bit of event playing, right? So the first step is to go into object button and let's define variables for our sprites, because since they're not a resource that exists in GameMaker, we need to save the ID of the sprite in a variable. So I will call one normal equals this, and then active equals this, but this time with the other sprite, active, this way. And then sprite index equals normal, and then what we can do is mouse enter sprite index equals active. No, never mind, not that at all. Stupid mistake, sorry. Mouse left button sprite index equals active. Then we have mouse left release sprite index equals normal, and the last one, mouse leave sprite index equals normal. So now the sprite should look okay when I click. It does seem to do this job. I didn't know the sprite looked bad when you clicked on it. I don't exactly like it, but it does the job, right? It's doing exactly what you would expect it to do. It's changing the sprite according to the state. So now I can click on the button. I'm sorry, I should have picked a better sprite. This one looks kind of weird. But anyways, thing is, if you hold the mouse, go outside and then go back in, it should still look pressed, which is the goal of it. And Yep. Next part is, now that we have a button that we can interact with, we want to actually set text and an action. So let's first define a font for our button. I'll call it F button. Normally I use 3 letters, but with fonts it just looks weird, so I put an F instead. Blah 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 blah. This one? Nope, I don't like it. I do actually have some very nice fonts there at the end though. Or maybe they just don't work in GameMaker. That would be sad. Or they're at the top. Ah, there they are. So I have some nice pixelated fonts here. I'll use this one, it looks nice. Yep, this one I want it to be, well, 12 is good. I want it to be bold. No, I don't want it bold. I don't want any anti-aliasing, or do I? I'll just leave it by default like that. So I'm creating a little font, a little bit console type of font, right? Now if you go into the button and then in the create event, let's set the font. So font equals F button. Each time you have something that can change, you should create a variable for it. So I just created a variable for the button. This way later, if I want to change the font, I don't need to change F button everywhere in my code. I just need to change it here in the create event and simply use font everywhere in the code. This also means that each button can have a different font, which is very convenient. I will also set a text value, which I'll put it to button by default. And that's it for now. Next, in the draw event, draw, we want to, of course, draw ourselves. So draw self. Otherwise, GameMaker will not draw the button, because if you put some code in the draw event, GameMaker will ignore the sprite. You have to draw it yourself. So draw self will do that. And then, like I said, draw set alpha 1, draw set color. I want the color to be black. And then draw set font. We will use the font of our button. And finally, we want to draw the text centered. Now, drawing the text centered implies that either you do calculation, either you set the alignment in GameMaker. But it's such a pain to always write all the code. So I will create a simple script which I can then import into all of my games. I'll call it draw text center. Draw text center will take exactly the same parameters as draw text in the same order, and what it will do is simply this: draw set ling fa center, draw set ling fa center. Now everything you draw will be drawn from the center instead of from the top left corner. Even sprites, which is very nice. So draw text argument 0, argument 1, argument 2. I won't take the time to check if the parameters are okay, because I'm calling a GameMaker script using exactly the same parameters. So the draw text will complain if something is wrong. And then, very important, set everything back to normal, because those are not, wow, face, far left, those are not the type of things that you set all the time. So draw set ling top. So I set it back to the left top corner, like it is by default. So instead of writing that all the time, I now can simply just write draw text center, which is very convenient. Draw text center, and I want to draw it at the half the width of the button. So the width of the button is 256 but I will use the width of the sprite, which is sprite width. Very convenient. Every instance have a variable that defines the width of the sprite, because if you use scaling, this variable will automatically contain the scaled value instead of the real sprite, which is very nice. And then I said I want it in the middle, and then on the Y I want it in the middle too, so sprite height divided by 2. And finally the text, which is text. So now it should draw button in the middle. And it doesn't. Oh, right, I did something stupid. It's drawing the text at the correct position, but it's not relative. Of course, you need to tell it the position of the button plus sprite width divided by 2, right? So, tiny mistake. Even I do mistake. I'm not perfect. No one is. So now we have a button with a pretty text written inside our button. Now I'm realizing that black is not exactly a good color for this button. Let's go with something more grayish. In GameMaker you have an infinite amount of colors. If you know your RGBs, then you can easily use them. I usually use hexadecimal values because I work in web, so I know my hexadecimals almost by heart. But you can also use RGB values. So you can use make color from RGB, I think. No, color make RGB from, I don't remember how it's called. Color, no. Make, there we go, make color RGB. You also have HSV, but I'm not going to use that. I will use hexadecimal values. I hope I didn't make it too, yeah, it's too light. That should be better. It's very simple. If all the digits are the same, it's gray. So there you go. That looks a lot better than before. And if I click on it, it still works. Actually, if we make the text go down a little bit, it would look even better. So we can come here, and in the draw, I can do a little if statement. If sprite index equals normal, then draw the text centered normally. Otherwise, draw the text center, but this time x plus 1. No, x plus sprite width divided by 2, but y plus 2 plus sprite height divided by 2. This will make the text go down a little bit, which should reinforce the illusion of pressing on the button. Well, somewhat. Like I said, the sprite is weird, so it doesn't exactly look good. But hey, we do what we have, right? Alright, so now we have a button. Now let me show you why this button is generic. If you go into the room, oh yes, let's quickly just create a sprite for our button. So SPR button mask. Just gonna do something white quickly and maybe type in button. There we go. So for our button here, I will give the button sprite. In our create event, we change the sprite anyway. This is just, oops, wrong one. This is just so that we can see the button in the room now. right? So now you can see it. If you right click on it and go into the creation code is executed right after the create event of an object. So whatever you do in the create event, you can override it in the instance creation code. The nice thing about instance creation code is that you can put a code for specific instance. So I can put a different code for different instance of a button. For example, I can set the text to be play. And then if we copy this button, I did Control C, Control V by the way. If I go into the creation code, I can change it for continue. Control C, Control V. Settings. And finally, quit. So now you only have one object, but multiple instances that will have different values associated to them. So you don't need to create tons and tons of button object in your game. You only need one. And then you set the sprite you want, you set the text that you need. Like I told you, you can change the font for, let me change the font for settings, because why not? So let's go into the object. Remember that we've created this font here. So let's create another font. I will call it F button 2. And let's choose a random one. There we go. It's quite different. I'll make it a little bit bigger, maybe 16. Let's go with that. Looks horrible, but hey, why not? And then we go into the room, and then I said it was, oh, also if you hover, you can see the code, which is very nice. If you have the text on the first line, you can immediately see which button is which one right away. So I want to change the setting button, so I come here, and then I set font is equal to F button 2. So if we did everything good, this button and only that one should have a different font. So there you go. By using a variable instead of setting the value directly in code, we can customize our buttons, and it still works very good. We have nice buttons that I can click on. They have text that I can change. Now the last thing is, of course, I'm clicking but nothing is happening. So what we need to do as the last step of our button is to create an action for it. Now to create an action, we need to go into our button and code this action. So if I go into the button in the create event, again, let's add an action variable. And for now, let's set it to no one. No one is a constant in GameMaker. It represents the number -4. It's used to mean it's not an object. In my case, it will mean it's not an action, so I'm doing nothing. So no one, very nice little value that GameMaker has. In other languages, it could be equivalent to null or void. So no one means nothing. There's nothing in here. I don't want to put 0 because the first script will have ID 0. The second script will have ID 1, etc. So if I put 0, I'm actually pointing toward an existing script. I could put -1, but if I'm going to use a value, might as well use one of the values that is part of GameMaker, so no one. Then we will come here and we will do, oh yes, let's add another variable. I will call it click, or rather can click, and it's set to false by default. You'll understand why very soon. So first of all, in the button, let's do a mouse left pressed. And when you left press on the button, we will set can click equals true, which means if you release the button and can click is true, the action will get executed. If you release the button and can click is false, it means that you probably click outside of the button, then move your mouse inside the button, and then release the button. In that case, for the sake of this example, I don't want to execute anything. I want to execute only if you click, you don't go outside the button, and you release the button. If you go outside the button after clicking, and you come back and release, nothing happens. So that's the point of using the can click. Because sometimes a user will click on a button and then they realize they didn't want to do that. So what will they do? They will move the mouse outside the button and then release the button to cancel the click, if I shall say it like that. So in mouse leave, we want to set can click equals false. And then in the left release, the first thing we want to do is if can click, we do something. If the user is not trying to click, then we just ignore the code I'm going to put here. So first, can click equals false because we're going to handle it. Next, we need to check if the action exists. So if script exists, action, script execute, action. So what we're telling GameMaker to do here is to check is the script with the following ID exist. If it's no one, GameMaker will return false. If it's 0 or bigger and the script actually exists, GameMaker will return true. And if GameMaker returns true, then we simply tell GameMaker to execute that script. We cannot execute strings. You cannot put some code in a string and tell GameMaker to execute that string. But you can tell GameMaker to execute a script based on the ID of the script. And the ID will be saved in the action. Now if I run the game now, nothing changed. Hopefully. So if I click here, nothing is happening. But next, I want, for example, to move the button to the right when I click on it. And to do this, I will do something special. In the left release, I will tell GameMaker to not only execute the action, but also as the first parameter to send the ID of the button that you clicked. Because maybe a script will be executed by many buttons, and if you want to know which button you clicked on, we will give it as a parameter. So let's come here and create a script quickly. On button clicked. Easy to remember what the script does. So on button clicked button ID. So var button ID equals argument 0, and then with button ID x plus equal 32. So we will move the button 32 pixels to the right each time you click on it, which might be weird, but the goal is just to show you that you can execute whatever you want by clicking on the button. So now if I go into the room, let's add this to the continue button. Creation code, I'll come here and do action equal on button clicked. Now to be able to give the ID of the script, you simply don't put the parenthesis, and it will save the ID of the script in the variable, which is action in this case. So now action is not equal to no one. So when we click on it, it should do something. So remember, I just put the action into the continue button. So if I click on play, nothing happens. Settings still has the font. Quit doesn't do anything. But now if I click on continue, if I click on it and go outside, nothing happens. If I click outside and go inside and release, nothing happens. If I click on it, go outside and go back inside, nothing happens. But if I click inside and release inside, it happens. Bye bye button. Now I can't click on it anymore. But yeah, so now you know how to create buttons, how to display a text on your button. Displaying an icon would be very similar. You would just draw a sprite instead of drawing only text. But now there's something I said at the start that we still did not do that is quite interesting, right? I said if we use a grayscale sprite, we can change the color. So let's do that. First of all, let's make sure we can change the color of the text. I didn't do that. Oops. There we go. So here we have text. Let's simply add text color. By default, it's going to be the color I made, which is gray. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All right. But we also want to have a color for the button, which will be white by default. So now if we're going to dedraw here, first of all, instead of using this, I can now use text color. And then before drawing myself, I will use draw set color. No, I will use draw sprite extended. I want to draw myself at my current image index, at my current position, at my current scale, image X scale, image Y scale, at my current rotation, so image angle, but then I want to change the color used to draw it. I want to use color, and the alpha will be image alpha. By the way, if you wonder what is the default value for the color here, it's called image blend. But in my case, I want to specify my own color. So white is the default. It will draw the sprite normally. And that's it. So now we are able to change the color. Let's try this right away with the quit button, which is the last one that we didn't apply anything, the play button being the normal one. So I want to draw the button as an aqua button with some very dark blue text. So the color will be as following, and the text color will be some very dark blue. Actually, that's pure blue. Now let's see if this works. There we go. I have a blue button with some dark blue text, and I never changed the sprite. I just changed the creation code, right? Only here I can make this button yellow if I want. So color equals no blue, complete green, complete red, that's yellow. And the color of the text will be, I don't know, red, green. Let's go with red. Text color equals no blue, no green, completely red. There we go. So now if I run the game, we should have a third button that is yellow with some red text. And I still have only one object in the game. This is, oh, I forgot I put an action on this one. Yay! This is how I make buttons in my games. And normally I don't code them. I just click on add existing object and import the object from another project. Because why recode what you already did? This button doesn't care about your game. You must program it right. Now something else that is very nice that you can do is we did put the sprite here, right? Here, normal and active. But what if instead I would do something like this? I'll put no one. And in the draw event, before drawing, we will simply do if sprite index is not equal to no one, then draw the sprite. There we go. So by doing this, now we can define a custom sprite for every single button. So in the creation code, I want this one to be, I want this one to be quite small. So normal will be equal to this, but instead of being insanely huge, I'll make it a bit smaller. and then active equals str slice 9 64 48 16 16 16 16 SPR button active. So let's make all the buttons in different sizes. This one will be a bit taller. I want it to be square. Let's go. Let's do a square button because why not? This one will be the default size, which was 256 by 48. And let's make the last one tiny. 48 by 24. I'm not even sure the text will fit in there. Hopefully it will. So now all buttons should have different sizes. I'll just move them a little bit because now that they're bigger, they will take more space. There we go. This one will be 4 square by 4 square, like this. So I can move this one up a little bit. There we go. Let's try this. Now our buttons should have different sizes. It did not work properly. Let's go see why. Oh, I know why. It's because I did not set the sprite index. Oops. So I need to actually add another line. Sprite index equals normal by default. So you would normally maybe create a script and it would automatically set sprite normal for you. I'll just copy it for now. And there we go. All my buttons have complete different sizes. They look insanely good because of the slice 9 script that automatically resized them accordingly, keeping the corners intact, which is what makes the button look very good. The text is completely custom. We can even change the color of the text and of the button, and I still can click on them. And as you can see, the quit button is perfect. I swear that I did not know that it would look like that. I was sure that the text would be bigger than the button. This is very nice. But yep, you can... Oh, I again forgot that this one had an action set to it. So of course the action can actually be go to next room or whatever you want. I was just quickly showing to you how to create buttons for your games. Hopefully this tutorial made you learn stuff. The goal will be for my stream to create mechanics like this one, which are not games, but can be used in games. If I would have built a platformer game and shown you how to create a menu, you probably would not have understood as much as what you did just now, because you would have all the other platform ideas in your head that would block the content that I'm trying to show you. By showing you only a simple thing without a game to go with it, hopefully I hope that it's easier to understand. So thank you for watching. This stream was extremely quiet. I did not have a single person tell me anything, which is quite sad because I wanted to try the stream to see, to test the interactivity with people, to see how it would be to answer questions while showing stuff. I guess that's going to be for another time. Meanwhile, this video will be saved on my channel. Hope that you like it, and make sure to go into the discussion section of my channel and request something if you would like me to cover it. Until then, see you and have fun coding in GameMaker.